The basketball player Megan Thee Stallion is referencing is widely believed to be Klay Thompson. And normally in these videos, I'd pull in clips and outside commentary to back up the discussion, but I don't think that's necessary this time. Here's why. You already know exactly what the reaction looks like. The same comments that always surface in situations like this. She's stunning. How does a man walk away or cheat on someone like her? It's the same energy we saw when Devon Franklin filed for divorce from Megan. And the reason that reaction keeps repeating itself comes from something deeper, a narrative that's been around for a long time. The idea that the black woman is inherently the prize. Black women hold all the leverage in dating and relationships by default. That beauty alone translates directly into relationship security. Now, let me break this down in a way that most men, especially those who came up the hard way, are going to recognize immediately. If you're part of what I'd call the late bloomer generation, particularly guys who came of age in the 90s and early 2000s, you lived this reality firsthand. When you were young, you had very little leverage. That's just the truth. Growing up, you'd see it play out right in front of you. Older guys, sometimes 20 or 25 years old, pulling up to high schools and leaving with girls who were 16 or 17. And at the time, that was treated as completely normal. Now, fast forward to today. Some of those same women are in their 40s, pushing 50. And if you're paying attention to social media, you can see how the dynamic has shifted. They have adult children now, and their position in the dating market looks nothing like it did when they were teenagers. Some are doing fine, but many have found that the leverage they had at 16 doesn't carry the same weight at 45.
Now take the average man who stayed focused, kept working, kept building. His position compounds over time in a way that is fundamentally different from how women's dating leverage tends to move. Institutionally, a man who stays on track accumulates resources, stability, and options in ways that tend to increase with age rather than decrease. That dynamic is at the center of what people refuse to acknowledge when these celebrity situations come up. And the reason I'm laying all of this out is so that the Klay Thompson situation can connect to something that everyday men, particularly everyday black men in America, actually experience and understand. Here's what tends to happen. When women are younger, in what people refer to as their prime, access is real. You can attract a Klay Thompson. You can get a man at that level to take you out, show you attention, and bring you into his world. Rick Ross is another example of the same pattern. He cycles through relationships every 6 or 7 months, and every woman who enters that situation believes she's going to be the one who's different. But if you zoom out and look at Klay Thompson's relationship history objectively, the pattern has been consistent for years. He's moved through relationships, short and long, with a wide range of women. And the common thread is that none of them lasted. That's not an accident. That's a reflection of his position. He's 6'6", widely considered attractive, and has earned over $300 million across his NBA career. For a lot of women, 1 or 2 years with someone at that level feels like a worthwhile trade, more valuable in certain ways than a longer relationship with someone operating at a fraction of that status. That's a calculation a lot of people won't say out loud, but it drives decisions constantly. The problem surfaces when the man decides he's done. Suddenly, he becomes the villain. But Megan apparently wanted Klay Thompson as a husband.
She talked about getting cold feet from his side, but think about what that actually means in context. She described holding him down, but how exactly do you hold down a man worth $300 million? What is she providing that his resources, his options, and his status don't already cover? And this gets to the core tension that exists when a woman pursues commitment from a man who genuinely doesn't need it. That's not an attack, it's a structural reality. Men who have built that kind of life, who have unlimited options, often reach a point where they ask themselves honestly, why would I limit myself to one person? What am I gaining from monogamy that I'm not already able to access freely? The man at that level can look at the situation clearly and say, "You weren't there when I was putting in the work. You didn't contribute to what I built. Your presence is enjoyable, but it isn't necessary." And that changes the entire power dynamic. Now here's the irony that ties this whole thing together. Artists like Megan have built entire brands around independence, the messaging that she doesn't need a man, that she moves how she wants, that no one can hold her down. And that's a valid position to take, until you find the one you actually want, and then you discover that the man you've chosen operates by the exact same logic you've been preaching. He doesn't need you either, and that realization hits completely different when you're on the receiving end of it. The reality is that Klay Thompson's behavior patterns aren't that different from what Megan herself has been open about in her own life. Similar energy, similar approach to relationships, similar body count conversation. The difference is that when a man operates that way from a position of significant leverage, the consequences look completely different than they do for a woman in the same situation. And here's where this stops being just a celebrity story and starts connecting to something much broader.
A lot of black women have made it culturally acceptable to publicly criticize black men, painting them as absent, financially irresponsible, or emotionally unavailable. But here's the contradiction that doesn't get discussed enough. When a black man actually builds himself up, stays focused, and accumulates real leverage, some of those same women don't quite know how to deal with that version of him, because that man now has options, and options change the entire dynamic. For the narrative to hold the way some people want it to, a successful black man either needs to be financially dependent enough that he can't afford to walk away, or conditioned enough by social pressure that he takes every criticism personally and adjusts his behavior accordingly. But if neither of those conditions applies, if he's free, financially stable, and unbothered, then the leverage shifts entirely. And this doesn't require Klay Thompson's money. This applies to the everyday black man who shows up to work consistently, invests regularly, earns modest raises year after year, buys a home, builds a portfolio, gets a passport, and keeps his expenses low. A decade of that kind of discipline compounds into something real. And once a man reaches that point, the loud criticism from the outside starts to carry less and less weight because he can see clearly what his options actually are. That man understands something quietly but firmly, that the frustration directed at him often comes from a place of scarcity, not strength. And he knows that if he simply gives it time and space, the dynamic tends to resolve itself on its own terms. The broader takeaway for black men isn't to model infidelity or bad behavior. It's to stay focused on building, keep compounding, keep growing, because your leverage increases with every disciplined decision you make, and no amount of public criticism can undo what you've actually built in private.
Klay Thompson's personal conduct aside, and yes, misleading a woman into believing she's the only one is fundamentally wrong. The pattern his situation illustrates is real. His market value has not declined despite his relationship history. That's worth paying attention to, not as a blueprint for how to treat people, but as a clear illustration of how leverage actually operates. Megan went into that situation holding her independence as a badge of honor, but she also wanted commitment from a man who has never demonstrated that commitment is something he prioritizes. And when a woman with a complicated romantic history of her own seeks exclusivity from a man with unlimited options and no structural reason to settle down, the math was always going to be difficult. Successful black men who stay on their path are far rarer than the public conversation acknowledges. If you're a black man earning in the top 10 to 15%, building wealth and staying focused, you are genuinely valuable in ways that aren't always said out loud. But as the saying goes, just keep living. The leverage speaks for itself over time.